Hi everyone, welcome to Off the Podium. I have Juan Maria Solare from Argentina, but currently residing in Germany. Hi Juan, welcome to Off the Podium.
Hi Tigran, how are you?
Doing well. That was a perfect pronunciation of my name.
Oh, thank you. I think I know your name because of Petrosian, who was a chess player.
Of course.
Petrosian, and he was, one of my heroes, of my anti-heroes in my early years, because I played chess a lot.
Wow.
And I learned a lot about the chess masters of the past.
Wow, that's impressive. You know, he's a national hero in Armenia, so
Yes.
I'm happy you know him. Sometimes nowadays not many people know of him anymore. You know, they know Magnus Carlsen and others, not so much Petrosian, since he was from the past now. Anyways, since we talked about Armenia right away, I want to ask you about the Armenian connection, because when I emailed you about getting on the podcast, you also sent me a link, and it turned out you wrote a piece for the Armenian genocide. So how did that connection work out, and why write a piece for the Armenian genocide?
Well, actually, I have to talk about the Armenian presence in my life in general, because, okay, let's put it this way. In Buenos Aires, in Argentina in general, but in Buenos Aires, and very close to where I live in, or where I lived in Buenos Aires, there is a huge community, Armenian community. Actually, the Armenian church is roughly 1 kilometer, 10 minutes walk from my place.
Wow.
In Argentina, in that neighborhood. So you went to buy bread, for instance, almost every day, and you found Armenian guys in the street and walking around. So this is one thing. So I grew up also with the large Armenian community around me, and two, the best friend of my father was from Armenia, was one of the first, and maybe the first official translator of Armenian into Spanish.
Wow.
In Buenos Aires. Yeah, we are talking about 1940, so imagine.
Wow.
And they shared a desk with my father, so it was a real friendship, was maybe his best friend. So his name of Berberian, no? Not Berberian, Bayramian, sorry.
Oh, okay, Bayramian, yeah.
Bayramian,
Yeah.
Shepard Bayramian, he was his name. And it was always at home, it was always mentioned at home. And also later in my life, I also got to know another Armenian guys, or teachers, piano persons, or composers like Alicia Terzian, for instance. She's 80 or 80 something years old.
Yeah.
One of the oldest of the first generation composers in Buenos Aires, in Argentina.
Yeah.
So always I had some connection with a personal friendship or a personal relationship to the Armenian guys or folks in general.
Yeah.
Girls or whatever, women or men.
Yeah, of course.
And I don't know. This is for me like a cousin, so to say.
Yeah.
A cousin.
Well, it was so great. You know, you responded so kindly and so warmly. I think it's partly your personality, but it's also the Argentinian warmth. I sensed it from the email right away. So thank you for that. You know, the relationship between Argentina and Germany has been, probably ever since World War I, or maybe more so after World War II or during World War II. But there seems to be quite a big Argentinian population or people in Germany now. What's the reason for that, you think?
Well, I think there are several reasons. One of the most important, possibly, that, say, in the 70s or in the 80s, for instance, I think there were several emigration waves, recent waves. For instance, in the 70s, it was in Argentina the military government, putsch, and a lot of persons went away because of safety. Maybe their ideas were not exactly to the right, to the extreme right, as the government wanted. So they wanted to be safe and just emigrated.
Yeah.
In the generation after that, say in the 80s, 90s, for instance, and it comes to me because I came here in the 90s, in the early 90s, it was more maybe the cultural immigration, so to say, not necessarily a political. Maybe an economic in some cases, but in my case it was a cultural thing. I wanted to achieve things that I thought that I couldn't achieve in Argentina, culturally speaking, for instance, to get paid for the concerts that I gave as a pianist, or to make a career as a composer.
Yeah.
And so I think that it was another kind of immigration because of another reasons, not political, but cultural.
I see.
Later, I am not really sure because I was all the time here, but I think in around 2000, also a lot of, Argentina was, in bankrupt, so it was broken.
Yeah.
Literally. It is very strange that a country is broken, but it was. And a lot of persons came, to Germany and of course to other places because of financial reasons.
Yeah.
So, and of course, some stayed and some went back or went to another country. This is another story. And the immigration movements are always very, very painful also because you are leaving something behind.
Of course.
That maybe you might come back, but even if you come back, you're another person, and the persons around you are another person.
Yes.
If you are there, say, in another country, say, 5 years, you might not notice, but 10 years, you will notice a change. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
So it's very strange, the feeling of not necessarily being neither nor, because it's in a point, you are neither in Argentina nor completely in Germany because, we are not born here. I was not born here.
Yeah.
So it is a whole, I'm missing a whole, how can I say, experiences from the youth. For instance, not having been in the kindergarten to the person who is now the owner of a very large hotel who could finance your career, for instance. Who can make a commission to you. Yeah, I don't know whether you can understand what I mean.
No, I perfectly understand. And it's interesting, the thing you say about this whole process. A person comes to mind, Loris Chuknavorian, who is an Armenian conductor, and he conducted the Armenian Philharmonic for many years. And during one of his interviews, he was born in Iran, but to an Armenian family. And so he was like, when I was growing up, the Iranians, the Persians, thought of me as a foreigner because I was born to an Armenian family and I grew up as an Armenian. And when I came to Armenia, people said, well, you're Iranian Armenian, so you're not really an Armenian. And he said, I spent a lot of time in the US and Austria, and people thought of me as an Armenian or a foreigner. So it's like I could have never found myself. So it's an interesting thing that even though you kind of associate with a certain thing, when you've spent time away from there or when you have a different background, it's kind of foreign but not foreign. It's kind of a interesting mix, but it's really interesting hearing about all of the things that you said. I want to know about your success in Germany, and as a composer you studied with some very well-known composers, and if I don't want to give any names because the list of people you've studied with is so long, but maybe some of your thoughts, and maybe you could talk about some of the composers that were influential in your life.
Yeah, sure. There are at least two kinds of composers who were influential. The first category is the persons who I met personally, and the second category is the composers that I just met the music, and we are influential anyway. Yeah. So you maybe are asking about the first category.
Sure. Yes.
I met, no?
Yes.
And I can think mainly about Mauricio Kagel, yes?
Yes.
Because he was, we had a similar past in the sense that he also emigrated from Argentina at the same age to the same city. I was in Cologne in the beginning. Now I am in Bremen, but it was 10 years in Cologne. And I studied with him music theater or new music theater, which is the concept of music theater is very strange. It's like it's not music theater like Cats or I don't know, Walt Disney stuff. Of course, but it's experimental music theater. Let's call it that way. Yeah. No? And I studied with him, but he was very inspiring, and I had the impression that it was one of the few composers or of the few teachers that constantly was asking you, what do you really want to compose? No? He was not giving you, for instance, assignments or exercises. Or yes, he was also giving exercises, but I will tell you one exercise, for instance. Suppose that you have in the right hand one instrument who says the truth, and in the other hand, another instrument who says the non-truth. And he said, not the lie, the non-truth, because the concept of lie is very strange and the non-truth is much open.
Yeah.
And both instruments begin a dialogue, a musical dialogue. Okay, boom, punt, this is the assignment. What can you do with that? So you have to translate that into sounds. It's much interesting and much complex than to say, for instance, okay, write something in 4/4 in D minor and should last 14 bars. Okay, this is technically very okay maybe for a beginner is the best. But the other approach is absolutely inspiring after a point in your career.
Yeah.
Because it is style independent. I mean, you can write something in D minor, but you can also write, of course, something with electronic music,
of course,
without no pitch at all, or of course atonal or whatever. You are not obliged to do anything. You are only obliged to do a duo with an instrument who says the truth and another instrument who says the non-truth.
Yeah.
And like this, he had some 50 exercises which were very imaginative.
Yeah.
This is possibly my main influence in the last years because of that.
Yeah.
And also because, for instance, I always call him to ask concrete things about the career. For instance, once I was about to apply to a scholarship in Stanford, you know, in California.
Of course, yeah.
And I was not sure, and I asked him, and he told me, well, listen, if you go there just because they are going to give you a scholarship and they will solve your financial things, don't go just because of that. And remember that the things you are going to learn there, you are going to apply in your whole life. I mean, so you have to think about those things. He didn't answer yes or no. He just gave me elements too, so that I can confront myself with my real wishes.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is sometimes that you sometimes miss in another composers who just say, or teachers who say, do this, do that.
Yeah.
And don't think too much about what do you want.
Yeah. I read about him, about your teacher. I found out about him through you when I read about you. Unfortunately, I didn't know about him at all before this. But two composers that are mentioned in your biography that I want to get to are Helmut Lachenmann and Stockhausen. Yeah. So if you don't mind maybe sharing some stories, because, you know, we have a lot of teachers, and I still list a lot of my teachers in my bio because even if they're not famous, they've really inspired me and they've got me to certain points. But, you know, for the general public, those two names would kind of bring up more interest. So if you don't mind sharing some stories or maybe your experiences with them.
Yeah, sure. For instance, let's begin with Lachenmann. And then with Stockhausen, because I can say more things about Stockhausen possibly.
Yeah.
With Lachenmann, I studied with him in Stuttgart once in a month, because he collapsed, or how to say, he condensed all his tuition once in a month, because he was very active as a composer, of course, and touring all the time.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
So mainly he gave his lessons analyzing music by Weber and by Luigi Nono.
Okay.
Who was his own teacher, his own composition teacher.
Yeah.
So sometimes he also talked about his own music, but not necessarily. And he was a little bit also, allergic against people analyzing his music and writing exactly as as him.
Okay.
Because it is a musical language which is quite easy to imitate. And of course, if you imitate something without the substance, it is not going to be very alive.
Exactly.
You can imitate, but if it doesn't come from inside, it's not authentic. And I don't want to say it is a fake, but the communication energy is not the same as if it were your own music language.
Yeah.
So I learned from him some things about how to think about music, about, let's say, decomposing. Not composing, but decomposing in the sense of analyzing each motive that you compose or that you write, for instance, one bar of music. And he said very often, okay, write one bar of music, complex, more or less complex, but not too much, but a little bit complex, and analyze it up to the end, and then use these elements of your own analysis to build the rest of the piece.
Wow.
This is a very German approach, by the way, because if you want, lots of pieces by Johann Sebastian Bach are composed in the same way, with the same concept of getting inspiration on the material of the first bar or of the first seconds, if you want. So it was very interesting to see how could he analyze the same motive from very different points of view, and depending on which perspective you take, the results are going to be absolutely different. For instance, imagine that you are going to make a piece for string trio, and your main motive is unison, or not a unison, say, 2 minor seconds. And each instrument has a different timbre. For instance, pizzicato, another one is a long note with a flageolet, so harmonic. And the third one is an open string. Okay. So it is just a small motive, but it's complex enough to derivate lots of different bars or of different motives from that. This is possibly the most complex thing that I learned from Lachenmann, technically speaking. After that, he was very, very warm as a person, and he works all the time, of course. He's very required all around. Do you want to say something about Lachenmann, or can I move to Stockhausen?
Go for it. Stockhausen, please.
Yes. It's very interesting because of several reasons. I learned from his music much before I got to know him personally. And I got to know him in 92 or 93, I think. But at least 5 years ago, 5 years before, I was analyzing his music, and not only his music, but for instance, for me it was very impressive how did he how did he write, he concretely notate his scores, his sheet music. The music itself, but also the program notes included in the score. And the clarity, the absolutely clarity with which he writes, he notates music. And I think this clarity in the notation reflects also a clarity in the musical thought, in the musical thinking. Also, another thing other technical thing that I learned from him is the following. He's very famous because of, for instance, his methods, like in the first years, the moment form or the group form. Later, about the formula, his formula concept. In any case, about, say, structuralist or structural ways of composing music. So, but, and this is a very important but, he also has the concept of the exceptions, of the insertions. Sometimes he makes a plan for a piece. The plan for a piece could be a piece of 70 minutes. For instance, I am thinking about Inori. Maybe you know. For orchestra, and also a gesture guy who is making gestures, serial ordered gestures. But he also has, when he has the feeling that something here is missing, this transition is very short, I should compose something which is not in the plan. He calls that insertion. And these moments of freedom are very important, because if not, it was going to be a predictable work, a predictable piece without breathing. This insertion, these exception moments, or these complementary moments, not necessarily exceptions, are like, in a comparison, like cadenzas in the classical time, where you are free to write a different thing, a comment or something which is not in the central part of the piece.
Yeah.
This is a very important thing that Stockhausen gave, because, let's say, if he were a second-range composer, he would only speak about structure and method and say the brain aspects.
Yeah.
But the feeling of timing and of doing something which is not in the plan, of being able to suspend, to put your plan in brackets and to invent a new thing. This is, I think, a characteristic of genius.
Yeah. Yeah.
With differences, the second range from a first range composer.
Yeah.
Then about his personality, for instance, no? Because I got to know him. Also a very important thing, because before that, Stockhausen as a teacher was a very strange person, because he didn't really teach. You could learn by, how do you say in English, osmosis. By getting infected by his way of thinking. Or by seeing how he rehearsed with the musicians, and you notice that he knows his piece perfectly from the beginning to the end, by memory. Also the rehearsal marks.
Man.
You said in bar number 50 you have to do that, and he hasn't the score before his eyes. He knows by memory that it is by bar 50. No? This is also a very important thing, that he knows his piece really a lot, and he knows what should sound. He has an internal image or sound picture before his eyes. So you can also learn a lot by seeing how he rehearsed with his performers. For instance, in the courses that he gave in Kürten, in this city close to Cologne, where he lived his last 20 years, I think. And he was 1 year or 2 years at the Musikhochschule in Köln, in Cologne. He was teaching, and there he taught, for instance, Johannes Fritsch. Johannes Fritsch was a viola player who was my teacher on composition in Cologne as well.
I remember reading that,
Yes, so I actually received also from his hands the way of thinking, the thought of Stockhausen, indirectly. And not also indirectly, quite directly, because he also had always a seminar about analysis of Stockhausen of the 60s, which was the 10 years in which my teacher, Johannes Fritsch, was in contact with Stockhausen very lot. He went with him to Osaka, to the German, to the, how do you say, Messe?
Okay.
To the exposition. To the exposition in Osaka in 68, 69 or 70, I don't remember exactly the year.
Okay.
Where his music, Stockhausen's music was performed hours, during hours, all day. Okay, so he had a real personal contact with him. So, and about his personality, he was a very strange person, in the sense that a very strong personality, which is at the same good and bad. He was very electric and very passionate. He could be very hard, but he could also be very warm. He was a man of extremes. So that's why, I think we can say that, because it is known he had lots of enemies in his time, because some persons couldn't stand him.
And he had enemies up until the last years, even, especially after I remember the incident, and sorry to cut you off, but the incident came to my mind because months ago I mentioned Stockhausen, and a musician said, is that the same guy that talked about 9/11, the
Twin Towers. I can talk about that in a second if you want.
Go ahead, continue, please.
Yes, of course. But I wanted to say that he was very warm. For instance, once I asked him about something in one of his pieces. I don't exactly remember the detail. And he said, yes, I wrote about this in my book, such and such, and look, here I send you both books. And each of these books, he was a gift for me.
Mm-hmm.
Each of those are 200 or 400 pages, and it cost, if not 50 pounds, how to say, $50.
Yeah, yeah.
It is extremely expensive books. I couldn't afford that, and he just sent it because, okay, I asked about something which was answered in the books, which is, of course, it was about his own music, but it's also quite generous. You wouldn't expect, I didn't expect that from him, actually.
Yeah.
I didn't ask for that.
Yeah.
I just asked about an answer, send me yes or no or whatever, and he sent me a whole book.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
For instance. And about September 11, you said, what I listened is that one journalist from Hamburg wanted to make him a trap, one radio journalist, and he edited his answer to something. Concretely, let me remember not to say something silly. He was asked about September 11, and the theoretical answer was it was a work of art.
Yeah, yeah.
Points. A great work of art.
Yeah.
But the complete answer was a great work of art by Lucifer.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. This was the whole thing. So, of course, if you omit Lucifer, the meaning is another thing.
Yeah.
You know, Lucifer, the devil thing, no?
Of course, yeah, I know.
Of course.
Yeah.
So, if you say it was a work of art by Lucifer, you understand completely different phrase.
Yeah.
And it seems that it was a journalist in some radio that edited the last part. So, because he didn't like him, and of course, it had a very horrible consequence, because by most people he is only known because of that phrase, which he actually didn't say that way.
Yeah. It's sad, isn't it? Especially in today's world, and that's why I like this podcast form, is because I actually am not going to edit any of what you said. So if people want to hear it, they could hear it, because it's so terrible that someone absolutely one of the most important figures of 21st century music is somehow remembered that way, but not by everyone, but some people, and we don't remember him that way, and I'm glad you actually talked about that. I want to talk about your compositions, because we talked about all kinds of different things and we didn't talk about you, which is the most important part. Tell us a little bit about what you do now, and also maybe in that whole kind of, there's a lot that you do and I don't even know where to start. You do so many different things, but one that came to mind right away is the tango, which you have a very big influence, and you're one of the few people that actually influenced a university to start a program or teach classes. That doesn't ever really happen. I don't know too many places that do that in the US, and I'm sure even in Europe.
Yes, okay. It's one of my favorite things, which actually I could say that I have like two languages, exactly as I talk in German and in Spanish and in some English, and a little bit Italian also, by the way. So I am also musically, I speak in two languages. One is the tango music, because I was born in Argentina, and of course, well, we will talk about this later. And the new music from Stockhausen, John Cage, or whatever, even Milton Babbitt, why not, is also something which is very close to me, to my heart. So it is difficult to say whether I would like to do only tango music or only contemporary music, no, or avant-garde or experimental, or how you call it.
Yeah.
Because it is like saying, as if if I was obliged to decide whether somebody should cut my right hand or my left hand.
Yeah.
No? Both will be horrible.
Yeah.
So I do not want to resign any of both things.
Yeah.
So about the tango music, well, maybe most of you know, which are listening, which is the, say, folklore music, or not folklore, but the popular music of Argentina, or one of the popular musics of Argentina, Uruguay, or of the South America in general. Also very beloved in Colombia or in Central America. Good. And if you were born in Argentina, you have no alternative. You have no chance. You have to listen to tango music, because even if you do not want, and even if you hate tango music, you are going to be bombed all the time in radio, even in the street.
Yeah.
Even in the street. So, or in the bus or wherever.
Yeah.
So you get used to listen to tango music as if it were just an acoustic experience, just like Cage said, like something which is just happening.
Yeah.
Without your influence.
Yeah.
Okay, so you listen to that. Making a long story short, I try to conceive my approach to tango music in a similar way that Bartok's approach to Hungarian or Bulgarian music.
Yeah.
So he wasn't a folklore man, he was a classical music guy who composed knowing a lot about folklore, but he composed within the classical music realm. He didn't try to compose folklore.
Yeah.
He tried to compose classical music with a very strong smell of folklore, so to say.
Yeah.
So in my case, it's similar in the sense that in principle, I compose or I play mostly with classically trained musicians. And when I compose or when I make an arrangement of any composition of the past or of Astor Piazzolla or of Carlos Gardel or whatever, I also try to write down everything which is needed and everything that a classical musician is going to understand immediately.
Yeah.
Because let's put an example with the jazz music, no?
Yeah.
In the jazz music, you have some notes, and you know by tradition that these notes are played, or that sheet music or that lead sheet is played in another way, or with certain components of improvisation or of traditional changes. Okay. If you devote 10 years or 20 years to jazz music, of course you are going to do that without any score.
Yeah.
Or with the score just as something that, so remember the notes.
Yeah.
In the tango music is similar. So, but how do you explain or how do you write a composition so that a person classically trained must not wait 20 years to know how to play? Okay, so you must be very accurate with the articulations and even with the dynamics. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
Things
tough.
That are not usually written down in the tango music.
Yeah.
So this is roughly my approach to tango, which is very useful for the Europeans because they cannot spend a lot of time listening 10 years of tango music to begin to have an acoustical experience.
Yeah.
They have to have something in their hands which sound like tango right now.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
And of course, if they want, they are going to make their own decisions.
Yeah.
But at the beginning, they want to say, okay, tell me what I'm going to play, and I will study it, but don't make me think too much in the beginning. And it works. It works and also has some contradictions, because if you really write down what you want to listen, the score can be so complicated as a Fahrenheit score.
Yeah.
So you have to make a compromise, mainly in the rhythm dimension, in the rhythmical dimension.
Yeah.
A compromise between clarity of the musical thought and exactness.
Yeah.
Because too much exactness. You say exactness, no?
Yes.
Exactness. You lose clarity.
Yeah.
And too much clarity, well, in the end, the score is only quarters, or how to say, eighths.
Yeah. All this talk, I wonder how often do you go back to Argentina nowadays?
There are two factors. One, when I am physically in Argentina, which is 1 year or 2 years, every 2 years, say, at the most, at least. And of course, I am in touch with all my friends of my first 26 years, and also of new persons, new friends that I got to know in the last years through internet.
Yeah.
So I receive the news every day, and I know roughly what is happening, for good or for bad.
Yeah.
So this is also another aspect.
Yeah.
It also belongs to the duality of being in another place where you were born.
Yeah. Well,
soon, yes.
Go ahead.
No. Soon, I think in 1 year or 2 years, I am 52.
Okay.
So I will be half of my life in Argentina, half of my life in Germany.
Wow. Okay. When I think of Argentina, and this is very basic kind of a thing, but when I think of Argentina, of course, there's the tango, and then there's soccer, football, and those two things. And you got the tango, and you're a master at that. How's the soccer coming along, the football?
Yes. Well, I play amateurish. As an amateur, I play football sometimes, of
Yeah.
course. I also have a piece which is called Pan y Fútbol
Yeah.
in Spanish, which is bread and football, or bread and soccer, you would say.
Wow.
You remember the Roman motto, circus, bread and circus? Like, how do you say that in English?
I don't know.
Funny. Okay, mainly it is one aphorism of the old Romans,
Uh-huh.
meaning that you can control the people by giving them bread, something to eat, and circus, which is something to get fun.
I see. Okay.
So
Okay.
today it would be bread. I mean, give the people something to eat and something like football, like so they are not worried about making revolutions. No?
Yeah.
It's an irony, of course.
Yeah.
But it was really Machiavellical. It was really said in the past, and actually it has some truth in every moment, except of course that persons want to think a little bit more than entertainment. But for most people, entertainment is enough. No?
Yeah.
If they have something to eat and something to get the mind busy, is enough.
Yeah.
And this piece, actually, Pani Football, is a combination, or it's a comment. It's a musical theater for radio, which was never produced because it's very difficult to produce, and it's very difficult to translate also. And it's just a simulation of a game, of a football game,
Mm-hmm.
With comments, with ironical comments.
Yeah.
And also with music, of course, with several characters.
Yeah.
I don't think it could be translated. Maybe it could be made an equivalent in other languages,
Yeah.
but to really translate it is a pain. It's too much. It would be very difficult because the original text in Spanish is very had lots of allusions, how do you say allusion? Yes, allusion.
Yeah.
Lot of references to concrete persons of the Spanish-speaking world,
Yeah.
soccer world. This is the point in which, say, music and sport could relate.
Yeah.
In my of course, not only.
Quite a few friends who are Argentinian who I've met through, various musical things. They have always complained about, the state of music in Argentina and how bad it is. But the one thing that comes to mind right away when I think of Argentina and classical tradition is Teatro Colón, which is one of the world's most famous opera houses, right? And I remember in the National Geographic at one point it was like the top 3 opera houses in the world. So how does that survive, but the rest of the country is sort of not doing so well musically? Or maybe it is, in your opinion.
Well, in my opinion, I don't know exactly these persons, but in my opinion, they should have lived 20 years ago in Argentina to see what it is not having anything.
Yeah.
I think they are persons who are a little bit younger than me.
Much younger.
So they didn't see, for instance, I remember very concrete. I was studying composition and I wanted to get access to the Stravinsky's Les Sacres du Printemps. Okay? So the score was not available. You could import it, and it was about one salary of 1 month to buy the score. Okay?
Wow.
The recording was also, you should import it, and it was extremely expensive as well. Okay, so jump nowadays. You can see 2 or 3 or 10 different versions of the recording for free.
Yeah.
In YouTube or in Spotify. Yeah, for free and legally.
Yeah.
Because it is, of course, no, you are not stealing anything, and you can purchase, you can buy the score for a reasonable amount.
Yeah.
In Argentina. So maybe it is, of course, it's difficult. Life is difficult, but come on, if you compare with in my own life 20 years ago, it is much easier.
Yeah.
Another thing is musicians are the performers, now, are much inclined to play contemporary music than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
If you talk about John Cage to a musician, or about, I don't know, Ginastera. Well, Ginastera is very old, but say Luigi Nono or Lachenmann,
Yeah.
or Stockhausen, or Mauricio Kagel, of course, or whatever. And they are not scared. They know who it is. They might not like it, of course, his music, but they are not closed to it.
Yeah.
Also, this is also a large difference because, say, 25 years ago, performers were not able to perform a piece by Lachenmann, for instance.
Yeah. It was
because
too difficult.
The extended techniques it implied.
Yeah.
They didn't want, and they couldn't also. Nowadays, I mean, if they can't, well, it's a shame for them. It's not. They are not proud of not being able to play Lachenmann, for instance. So, of course, this is difficult. Like music in Argentina is difficult, but it is much easier than, say, one generation ago. Much easier. Also, the consciousness of keeping the works of the past is much concrete now.
Yeah.
So, of course, it's not all the job is not done. The whole thing is there's a lot of things to be done, but it's much easier than in the past. Okay, and about the Teatro Colón, yes, it's a theater with a lot of history. For instance, Enrico Caruso was there, also Pavarotti or Plácido Domingo, of course, and who else? Gigli, the tenor of the 50s, I think, the 50s, 40s he was there. Anyway, before of my time, so I don't know exactly the time. And now also the main orchestras can play there with Barenboim, for instance, or with Marta Argerich. It's one of the temples of music in South America, in South America. This is clear.
Yeah.
Because of the acoustic, in a great part, and this is mainly because of the acoustic, I think. Also an important thing. I don't exactly know when, but I think it was, say, 20, 30 years ago, they began to have a workshop or a place where they could also make contemporary opera. Not only Puccini and Verdi and, I don't know, Mozart, Wagner, but also in a smaller room, contemporary opera, experimental music.
Wow.
And this is something which is, it's also good.
Yeah.
It's also good.
Yeah. You've had such a great career. You've conducted, are teaching at many colleges in your career, and composing and tango and everything, all that you've done. What advice would you give to young musicians in the 21st century of music?
The advice, I think the main advice is that you try to understand what you want to say, and not to follow what you think that other persons are going to consume better. And this is a struggle every day, because, of course, in my case, for instance, if I make a recording of, I don't know, piano solo, a ballad, which maybe I'm not really like, but I could, and I know it is going to have much more listeners than, I don't know, electronic music, experimental or whatever.
Yeah.
The temptation is very large to make that. And the question is, do I really want to do that, or is the context which is guiding me to do that? And there's a point where it is difficult to decide, because your art is not in an empty place.
Of course.
You make art for a community also.
Yeah.
And if nobody's going to listen to that, well, maybe it does influence your expression. So I think if I should say something, is to focus on two things: and the expression of your own soul, and the communication, which implies a second person.
Wow.
So you have both ideas. The communication, you have to relate to a second person, whom you are talking with.
Yeah.
And expression in the sense of being true to yourself.
Yeah.
I think this is the main thing. I think it's an important thing in any case.
Yeah, I read that you've been a jury member for quite a few competitions, and also have been successful at competing at a few competitions. That's something that I've struggled with, both thinking about and just competing. And also I know many musicians that have struggled with the idea and with all the corrupt things going on, but not only just the corruption that's happened, but also just personally, just being in that moment where you're being judged. Your thoughts on competing, both as a competitor and as a jury member.
Yes. Okay, in the end of the day, the competitions are a lot of fake. Not because of corruption, not necessarily. No, imagine we are in a perfect world. There is no corruption.
Yeah.
But I have seen also with which, say, superficiality.
Yeah.
People decide the price. Say that A is going to become the price and not B.
Yeah.
And why? And the reasons are absolutely superficial.
Yeah.
And for instance, I won a very important competition. Which was a whole year getting paid to live in a place, okay,
wow.
And just to compose, perfect. Wow. And after that, I got to know the how do you say, juries? No,
jury member,
the judge, the jury member.
Yeah.
And after 5 minutes talking, I understood very clearly that that guy had much less acoustical experience than me.
Uh-huh.
So he was judging me. And of course, I am very happy that I got the prize. But say, this is okay for to pay your bills and whatever. But in the real world, which is the value of that prize? I mean, in the real world, what I mean is in the, say, some transcendental world, or in the world of musical values. No?
Yeah.
It's very relative. Very, not a lie. It is not lie. It's not truth.
Yeah.
It's not exactly a lie. It's not truth, because the truth would be maybe another one, that the persons who judge you know much more than you.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the case. Yeah. And there are lots of kinds of competitions, of course. And for instance, let's make maybe it's not a good example. There are some competitions, for instance, now there are a lot of competitions online, where people have to vote.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and you know what happens in the end of the day, if you have a large amount of friends, you are going to win. Yes.
Yeah.
And this is actually is ridiculous.
Yeah.
If you want to say, because the concept of successful artist is not only a person who composes or very well, which the music is very good, but also an artist who has a fan base.
Yeah.
And I think these are different things. And
the world has changed, so things are moving in different directions. You know what?
Yes.
Along the same lines, I sometimes see just absolute ridiculous Facebook pages or Instagram pages or Twitter people who are on Twitter who are absolutely ridiculous. And they just post pictures of themselves, and they have 50,000 followers, and then someone who's actually a really well established composer or musician who's dedicated his whole life to doing this one thing and has 1,000 followers or something. So the priorities have changed.
Yes, and the consequences are two.
Yeah.
One, well, you can think this is horrible, or you can think, okay, we have to talk in that language even if it is not our mother tongue.
Yeah.
So we have to learn that language as well. So in a point, for instance, I go on taking part in competitions.
Yeah.
Just now I am preparing one again to a competition for a call for works in this case. But anyway, it's different. A call for works is different from a competition, because in a competition there is one winner and 99 people who hate the judges.
Yeah,
it's true.
Yeah.
So actually, they used to say, yes, we make this competition to stimulate the creation. Well, I don't feel very stimulated if I lose 99 competitions and win one, for instance.
Yeah.
But this is also another part of the thing. But anyway, even if it is not our mother tongue, I think we have to talk in that language, because it's the language in which the world is moving.
Mm-hmm.
So for me personally, it's a pity, because I would like that things were different. I would like that things were different, but are not different.
Yeah.
So, as you say, the world is changing. I think before it was also the same, but not in the same way, just in another way. For instance, think about Mozart. Okay, if the arzobispo, how to say, the king or the whatever said, "I like this music of Mozart," he was going to have I don't know, a lot of dollars. He will earn a lot.
Yeah.
And if the king, who has no idea about music, said, "No, I do not like this piece by Mozart," so his career would have been ruined.
Yeah.
So actually, also in the past, the careers were in the hands of people who knew much less than Bach, much less than Mozart, much less than Beethoven. So now it's the same, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to say that X person concrete with name and surname knows less than the competition, the musicians who take part in the competition, but sometimes they are not necessarily better as a musician.
That's true.
The people who take part.
Yeah.
The participants.
Yeah.
Okay, we have to live with that, and I think it has been always like that, with different dialects maybe.
Yeah.
In the past, with the kings, and now with another
form.
Tastemakers.
Yeah.
Even if it is a collective tastemaker, like online voting.
Yeah. Doing this for many decades now, what inspires you to continue doing music and wake up every day and continue doing what you do? What inspires you?
I think it's mainly to listen what I want to listen.
Yeah.
And the things that I want to listen don't exist, so I had to compose them. And I think this is the easy thing.
Yeah.
It's the easy thing.
You know, we talked a lot about various things. Anything that you want to talk? We've talked at this point close to an hour. What have we missed? I'm sure there's many more things to talk about, but anything that you want to talk about?
Don't know. Give me a keyword.
Keyword.
Some keyword. Or two or three, so I can choose.
You know, one thing that comes to mind right away is composing for orchestra, and I've realized that many composers, especially young composers, kind of shy away from it, don't want to do it much anymore. They compose for chamber music, but not for orchestra. What's the future of this for composers, and do you compose for orchestra?
Well, right now, yes, but there is a concrete situation. I conduct my own little orchestra, which is an amateur orchestra. Amateur, you say?
Yes. Okay. Amateur or community orchestra, you could say.
Community orchestra.
Yeah.
And I am preparing a program with a piece of mine for choir and orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
But suppose there is no such a thing. Suppose that you compose a piece or two for orchestra, and you begin to knock on the doors of lots of orchestras, and you receive a no, you receive a rejection day after day. I don't think you are going to compose a third piece for orchestra.
Yeah.
So I absolutely believe that, because the dynamic of getting a piece performed for an orchestra is absolutely different as having two or three friends in an ensemble that want to play your music.
Yeah.
For instance, head for the composer's side, no?
Yeah.
It's a great initiative of that guys in New York, Vox Novus.
Uh-huh.
And they have every day, I think, 10 or 20 competitions or call for works where you can participate. And 99% are for chamber music, maybe 1% is for orchestra, and it implies that you pay a lot of money to get your piece recorded.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is the reality. So you can find a lot of, musicians that are going to maybe perform your piece, a chamber music piece, but you are maybe never find an orchestra that is going to conduct you to perform your music, because for them it is also a risk. They are risking lots of money. Just imagine how expensive it is one concert for a whole orchestra.
Yeah.
Say 50 persons, each person get at least 100 things. So you have at least 5,000 as a salary of the musicians. You have to add something for the conductor. You have to rent the hall, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And you are at least by $10,000 one concert.
Yeah.
So you have to refinance your thing. You have to sell some tickets. And it's the reality that sometimes a contemporary music piece is not going to sell $10,000 of the costs.
Yeah.
So for them, it's also a problem. So that's one of the reasons, of the sociological or sociocultural reasons, because orchestral music is difficult to compose.
Yeah.
Having said that, now you have a lot of virtual orchestras, no? You
Yeah.
can have VST instruments which sound better or worse, but you could make orchestral music.
It's interesting you said that, because I know an Armenian composer, Alexander Kaloyan, who does virtually what you just explained. Most of his recordings, he has maybe about 10 recordings, and all of them are done with the online program of Orchestra, and it sounds great, actually.
Mm-hmm. You have to be a real master to make it sound like an orchestra. But of course, a lot of film music are made like that.
Of course.
And not really recorded.
Yeah.
So I don't have the know-how to make that. I would really love to, because in the end of the day, at least you have a very good demo, which can inspire other persons to perform. Can inspire real orchestras to perform your music. But at least you have the recording, so to say. And however, to write for a virtual orchestra could be a trap, because let's put an easy example. If you compose in real life for a flute, and at the same time you have, I don't know, 3 trumpets and all full of horns, and the flute is in the first octave, you are not going to listen nothing.
Yeah, that's right.
Or you are not going to listen nothing. But in virtual instruments, you could listen to flute as if it were really before your eyes.
Exactly. And
so this could be a trap, in the sense that you are maybe not going to learn the real acoustic of the instrument. But it's a small problem in comparison with the other one.
I get many scores.
If you're aware of it, it's not a problem.
I get many scores. I conduct a couple of orchestras, both youth orchestras and community orchestras, and I get so many scores every year to conduct a piece, and I always wonder what the composer is thinking, because some of them are just are not possible on those instruments, because they just like you explained, they didn't think about how to orchestrate and make it actually possible for an orchestra to sound good playing that, because they've programmed this on the Sibelius and Finale, and they don't have actual experience composing for orchestra. So that's another thing that lacks, that is not in the education system, at least in the US, where there aren't many opportunities for students to have one-on-one opportunities with musicians to learn and understand the dynamics and the abilities of the different instruments. So hopefully someday that will change in the education system for composers to have better opportunities.
Yes, this is interesting that you mentioned, because when I was studying theory, with his name, who was Horacio López de la Rosa. He was a composer from Argentina, and I was 14 until 18 years old. So every 2 months, roughly, he brought to us a real performer, say from oboe, and he played with us some pieces, and he made a dictado, and he dictated some easy melody, which we have to write down. And of course, he explained the characteristics of the sound, how does it sound, I don't know, the range, of course. Also the possibilities, not only the range, but the possibilities, for instance, concluding in the oboe is the opposite. In the first octave, it's very loud.
That's right.
Much louder than the flute, or whatever. These little things that you have to know. And this is, if I see it now, it was gold in the hand, because this kind of acoustical experience, you are not getting that, if not. And it is actually this easy to include in the syllabus, in the how do you say?
You're right, in the curriculum, in the syllabus. You're right. Yeah, it's easy to have it, but it's not there, and it's definitely not there at many schools and colleges here in the US. Anything else you want to share with us?
No, I think for today it's okay.
I always say this, and I really hope some of the previous guests, I've had around 30 guests at this point, I hope some of them do return and talk to me more about what they're doing, because the first one, is always kind of getting to know each other. And when you meet a person again or you talk to a person again, it kind of takes off and in a different way, in a different kind of a vibe, and it has a different kind of a feeling. So I hope you come back and join me again. We could talk more about all the different things that you've done. And there's so many other things that we could talk about, the childhood and growing up in Argentina and many other things that you've done. You've had such a long career and a very good one, and you've collaborated with so many people and learned from so many people. So hopefully I'll have you back on at some point.
I would love to. Yes.
Thank you so much for joining me, and good luck, and hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.